my favorite is Perry. I like doing him the most. It's oh no, how you going, Keithy? Like,
Perfect.
oh chips. I was like,
Hey guys, a couple of months ago we done a review for Sky Squadron, so if you want to watch that again, just click the link above. Now this is a game that we here at VR Escape highly regard. It's got scores of 4.95 out of 5 and it is only a demo, so it's clear that we're not the only ones. The finished product hopefully available across Oculus and Steam in late 2021, but in the meantime the demo is available for you all via App Lab. We had today the honour of meeting up with the developer to talk about his creation Sky Squadron, about game development and VR in general. So if that's of interest to you, please do stick around. Today we've got James Bowling with us, who is co-founder of Trickshot Development, all the way from Australia. So Trickshot is a startup game development company founded in 2018 and are the creators of an awesome game called Sky Squadron. So James, just for us, just so those people that are watching, could you just talk a little bit about what Sky Squadron is?
yeah. So Sky Squadron's kind of our VR take on kind of Star Fox. So it's a game where you're kind of in a Star Fox inspired universe where you've got kind of animal friends that are helping you fight things, and it's sort of like based around kind of aerial combat. But in this particular case, you're in like a gunner seat, and so you'll go through a series of missions where you'll have to be fighting off whatever particular big bad is sort of in this mission. We kind of want to take elements of Star Fox and kind of bring them into VR and make an experience that is pretty accessible for everyone. Because like me myself, I don't have the best VR legs, so we wanted to make like a game that we could basically give to your mum or your grandpa or something, and like let them experience VR in a fairly comfortable way, but not just make it like an amusement park ride where you're not doing anything. So making the controls very accessible and very intuitive, and also giving it like a presentation which is pretty accessible. We've actually been pretty happy that we're worried a bit with the Star Fox stuff that it might be a little bit too niche. Like we sort of be focusing in on this thing that will require nostalgia to really appreciate. But we haven't found that's the case. Like it's like an art style that, or a presentation that, if you know the inspiration, it's great. You kind of feel like, oh, cool, I vaguely remember this. It makes me feel the kind of like the warm and fuzzies of when you used to play Star Fox 64 or something. But if not, it's still perfectly accessible. Like it's like marsupials having like sky pirate adventures. So
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like for me, like when I played that game, like some of the things about retro games, like the old games when you were younger that you played, to suddenly kind of feel like you're inside that game is a whole new experience in itself, and it really has that like nostalgia to it. And for you, you're absolutely right with the VR legs, because when we were playing on yours, you don't get any of that problem. Like you don't get any seasickness or anything, considering you're floating around and going through.
well, you mentioned before that it started off as a mobile game, and it did. If you actually go back and like try to find the really early Sky stuff, I'm sure it's still floating around YouTube somewhere. You can see that it's like behind the plane, and you're basically controlling the plane, and it's still kind of on rails, and you're doing the same basic thing, but like very different perspective. And basically, we were making it as a mobile game for a while, and because we've got kind of mobile background, and we kind of reached a point where we looked at the mobile market and we're thinking, well, can we do this? Like we've made mobile games in the past, and the market's changed considerably since then. So we did the kind of the Silicon Valley pivot thing. Basically, we looked at like, oh, what do we got? What can we do to take all this work we put in and kind of make it more viable? And we thought, well, we've got mobile experience, so we know how to get stuff running on potatoes, basically. We've got this tech that can kind of run on pretty much anything, because we wrote it in Unity, so we can deploy a bunch of stuff. And we thought, well, why not VR? And that just kind of felt right. Like we kind of where the mobile scene is, where you got to aggressively monetize it, and you got to kind of put in all these predatory kind of mechanics to kind of make any money out of it, because you can't just sell it. You've got to make it free to play. And we sort of saw it as an opportunity to kind of make a game, like just make a fun game.
Do you think VR has probably like re-energized some of that game? You know, because in terms of like the older gameplay, it feels like VR has that potential like, to like re-energize some of that older stuff and bringing it to the forefront.
Yeah, it feels a lot like early mobile back before the $1 game screwed everything, and there was this race to the bottom that just made the market is what it is today. Um, yeah, like I feel like it's just I don't know, it's fresher. Like I'm fingers crossed the market doesn't end up there. Like we don't see a repeat of history, and with the VR market ends up like mobile. I hope not. At least where it is at the moment. Yeah, it does. It kind of almost makes me think like even the early like DOS days, like even back in the 90s, where it's like a bit of a wild west. Like you've got services like SideQuest, which is where we have it at the moment, um, where there's this avenues to kind of get stuff out and get a bunch of people playing it. Yeah, it feels like a new exciting space, and especially for a small team like us, where there's only two of us, it feels like the most viable place for us to be.
And how do you go about coming up with a concept for a game? So, it's a bit like when you read a good book and you kind of think, well, this is just someone's idea and they brought it to life. So, do you sit around a pub table and say, let's think about a new game and start hatching things out on a beer mat, or how does that work?
It's very iterative. So we tend to kind of do stuff and then reassess it and go, well, what works with this and what doesn't. A lot of the time it's like say the start of Sky, like that started by I just decided to prototype some plain tech, and then we did a pitch to Screen Queensland for some funding, and then I don't know, like we just had like this idea and we iterate on it. And like a big part of it also is me working with Michael, where I'll make some stuff, he'll go away and do something surprising with it and break it. And then I'll go, that's awesome, I better go fix that now. and then we kind of like do that again. So it's sort of like I kind of build out these core tools and kind of like focus on gameplay, like core gameplay and stuff like that. Michael focuses on kind of the content and the levels and all that kind of stuff. And we find that kind of bouncing off each other like that. Like Michael will come to me with an idea of like, oh, I want to get in, I don't know, something so that smoke could come in and it obscures the view, and he wants to be able to like swipe it. And so, oh, that sounds really cool. Like, can we do it with what we already have? If the answer is no, I'm like, well, how about I go make some tools so we can do that? And then next time he'll have the freedom to kind of do more stuff. So yeah, that's kind of how we do it. It's like this kind of like bouncing off each other, where I'm kind of focusing on the tech and giving Michael the tools to do things, and he's kind of focusing on actually building it out and kind of like building the levels and the pacing of the levels and things like that. Yeah, it works out pretty well.
I mean, the creative process obviously is probably the most fun part, isn't it? In terms of like building it up and coming out of ideas, and let's build that in. How much feedback have you had, and how has that feedback actually been fed into the game?
We've had quite a bit, and a lot of that comes through like Discord, or reading reviews and things like that. And some of it's quite direct stuff. So it'll be like someone's like, "Oh, I feel like the seat's too low," and it's like, "Well, all right, what can we do to fix that?" Well, you can go in and add options to make the seat go up and down. Like that's sort of like simple things. But other things might be, "Oh, this is a bit boring," or I don't feel like I'm doing enough here. Like one of the ones we had was people saying, "Oh, you just sort of hold down the firing. There's no reason to not fire." And so what we've been working on for the next round is actually a heat system. So it's more where we've listened to the problem and like, okay, they're right. Like there's no good reason to not shoot. Like, why wouldn't you just shoot all the time? And so in that particular case, I've gone away and I've researched heat systems, looked at other games and things like that, and then tried to find something that will make you think more about your shots. So you're not always just holding down. You have to be aware that if you do that, you will be punished for it. But then also make yourself not too punishing, so it gets annoying finding that balance.
Yeah, agreed. That's a good point actually, because I think I kept my triggers down the whole time, just blasting everything out.
Yeah. And it kind of like, because like one of the things I like to focus on is like the nuance of the gameplay and the way you interact with it. And so there's been all kinds of stuff we've had to do with, like, one of the things we added a while ago was like one-handed firing. So it's like you can just grab one handle and shoot. You don't have to use both. But if you do that, you're only firing one of the guns. So it's like, there's like this incentive of like, there might be a fire you need to put out so you can keep shooting, but you have to take your hand off and pad it. But if you're doing that, then you're only dealing half damage. So like, we try to look at, we've got these pretty simple controls, but what kind of nuance can we add in to how they work? That it's also kind of intuitive. Like, I'm sure people can understand if you're not holding the trigger, it's not going to fire. And, you know, like you can do two things at once. And in VR, then it's sort of this more tactile experience of like, you know, reaching around the cockpit and stuff like that.
I mean, how have you found that, like moving into VR development? I mean, it's quite a big step change, right? From mobile development through into...
Yeah, yes and no. I think moving to Quest felt like kind of doing another mobile platform because, you know, it's just basically on Android. From a technical perspective, there were a whole bunch of optimizations that needed to come in. Like, we already had it running pretty well on mobile, but when you hitch frames on VR, you feel it a lot more. So it's actually one of the things I'm doing at the moment is I'm going through and doing an optimization pass because we've just basically added text so we can do endless generation. And so we're getting hitches and things because I had to change the way we did things anyway. So there's like the technical challenges was similar but different. Probably the bigger things is there's a lot of like not solved problems or new problems. So I guess like an example of one is the UE placement and what that does to eye strain. So we found out pretty quickly if you have like say damage on the windshield, and that sits kind of center frame, and you're trying to focus on something in the distance, you kind of your eyes get confused because you start to try to focus on different things. And you don't have to, like your eyes. So it's just like it feels wrong. Like it's like it kind of hurts your eyes. So it's just discovering things like that. So, you know, we kind of try to keep the center view quite free of depth cues, or if there are, like, it's very mild ones like rain and things like that. Doing things like putting the corners of the ventral just at the point where you can see out enough, but we're reducing the nausea. Because if you have the cockpit too open, then yeah, like you're more susceptible to feeling sick. Or the strength of the curves moving through the level. Like when we first did the mobile version, we were using the old curves, like the old pathing through the sections, and doing that, you felt sick pretty quickly. So we kind of had to kind of tone all that back quite a lot.
And how did you test, you know, if people were feeling ill or not? I mean, you said you haven't got the best VR legs yourself. Was it a case of you kind of being the main guinea pig, or did you give it to family and friends and stuff? Or
a bit of both. We used to be in a shared workspace before COVID hit, which was really good because we could just pull in different people, particularly people who'd never used VR, and like you get a very kind of like authentic experience of like where are people screwing up. Last Christmas, I took the Quest round to like a family Christmas, and that was really good. Got to put it on a bunch of people. But I think I kind of use myself as a bit of a gauge because like I know, like I feel sick more than Michael. So what will normally happen is Michael will kind of build out a level, and I'll play through it. And if I'll say, this curve feels a bit, you know, a bit tight here, or there's this kind of like lateral movement doesn't feel quite right, we'll kind of use that as like a kind of like a red flag to go, okay, we probably should kind of like, you know, straighten out that curve a little bit or something like that.
So there's a lot of thought goes into it, which I think, you know, as a player of a game, you may not appreciate the amount of effort that, you know, guys like yourself are going to try and make that experience as smooth as possible and to reduce that kind of problem, I guess, you know. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, a lot of thought goes into, like, there's so many little things that we iterate on. Like with the current heat system, even though we haven't got it out yet, we've done a fair bit of iteration on it internally. And with that system, it was like finding like the ways to communicate it. And when I was mentioning before about we kind of keep stuff off the center of the screen, we kind of ended up in the situation where we want something to be really obvious, which is your weapons are about to overheat. But we couldn't really put something in the center of the screen because it just would be too jarring. So it's like finding that right position, kind of like on the screen. Or another thing we've changed recently is like the health bar and, well, now the heat bar as well. And we ended up landing on something a little bit like GoldenEye 64, where we kind of just put like these health bars in the periphery. And so we found that worked out really well, because previously we'd had like the health bar sitting really low, and you needed to constantly look down at it to see where it is. Like we'd have cues like the cracks in the windscreen in the corners, but if you wanted to know where you're at, you had to kind of look at it. But yeah, actually having this like just off in the corner of your eye was just enough that you didn't really have to glance over to know where it is. So we kind of like divvy up the screen into like glanceable space and like almost like secondary information, like objectives where you actually have to move your eyes to look at it. And that's like, because that's just not really relevant most of the time.
Where do you see it going then, James, in terms of like your next steps for Sky Squadron and growing it? Because my personal opinion on it is that I really think you've got something there with that game, and of course VR is such a growing. I feel like it's a big growth market. That like if you're in the position and you've got that game there ready, as the masses even more start to come onto it, you're going to be in a really good position for that.
Yeah, so we're currently kind of pushing towards like getting done later this year. That's sort of where we're aiming for at the moment, and we're pretty on track for that. Because a lot of what we're doing is also just getting like we've worked with kind of games before where we've gone and built out a lot of content really early. And it ends up really biting you in the ass, because you kind of like you're still learning as you're going, and so you build all the stuff and then you find, oh, this doesn't work, you got to go back and like change everything. So rather than kind of like building out all the content really early, we've sort of been iterating on kind of smaller blocks of content, and then we can kind of really ramp up from there. So we're kind of at that phase now where we're like starting to build it out more. But yeah, so later in the year, we're expecting things. We'd really want to get in there, especially like getting in App Lab, like getting on there has been really good. Like, yeah, I feel like it's early enough you can get in and kind of like make a mark, and then when the bigger market comes in, because I've already got like my mum asking like, where do you buy these Quest things? Like I can see it, it's like it's starting to kind of get into like just the general kind of like public domain of thought, like. And at some point, it'll be maybe next Christmas, maybe the Christmas after, there'll be like this triggering point of like, the price is already right. Like these things are cheap enough. Just need, I mean, in Australia, unfortunately, there's no way to just go buy one. But like in a convenient, like in a retail store, I think the moment it can be like this, $300-400 Christmas gift that you can just go down to like an outlet somewhere and buy it. Like, yeah, then I think that you'll be selling a lot, and yeah, that market will be picking up.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it feels like everyone at the moment in that industry is kind of, you've got people creating products that kind of work alongside it, be it like the haptic vests that have come along, and so all this stuff's starting to come out, but of course it's still quite expensive. So unless you're kind of a real an addict at playing VR, I feel like that's kind of focused at those, whereas you got the big market, which is probably going to be your everyday kind of casual gamers that just want to kind of get in and see what it's all about. And I think once people go in and see what it's about, which is what the beauty of Quest was that it suddenly got it into everyone's hands, and people suddenly realized, wow, this actually is quite an amazing experience. Because I think when I first tried out VR, my view what it was going to be like was, it's just going to be graphics and a goggle, just looking at some. Whereas the feeling of immersion, you can't really explain to anybody. So obviously we know we've got a channel trying to talk about VR, etc. But you can't really get across that feeling of being in the environment, which is really a big deal, I think. So it's quite interesting on where it's going to. And I think App Lab probably for you has really opened that market as well, hasn't it? Because that's given you the opportunity to kind of get those games in there and people trying it before you kind of release it.
Yeah, and also it's a pathway into Oculus. That was sort of something else that was kind of missing before. Where there was side quests and you could get on side quests, and that was great, but you still had to go through this like approval process to get onto the Quest store, and that was a very kind of opaque, like, because we applied for it and we weren't accepted, and there's very little, like, you're not talking to a person to get the feedback to know what you have to do to apply again or anything like that. And so just from like a business risk perspective, as soon as we've got App Lab, it's like, well, we can prove the product. Like, if we've got a game on there, I think at the moment we're averaging about 4.2, I think somewhere around there, which I'm sure we can get higher. It's a much easier sell. Someone at Oculus can go, oh yeah, this game's performing well, it's got a bunch of good reviews, a bunch of good downloads. Like, yeah, maybe this is the one that we can push. So like the App Lab took a whole bunch of risk out of it. Like it's still there. Like we still don't have an Oculus contact that we can go, hey, you can get some feedback, you know. But you know, it's definitely a step up from where it was.
This App Lab seems to have exploded of late. We were looking at it sort of earlier this year, weren't we, Andy? And the content.
Yeah.
But if we look now, you know, just a few months on, the amount of content in there seems to really grown, you know, by a huge amount, and there seems to be a lot of interest from people sort of in the VR community now in App Lab, which is a really interesting evolution because it seems to have happened very quickly.
Yeah, and that just sort of says how much was there waiting. You know, like it was just like this untapped kind of creative source for that to explode like it has.
I think with the App Lab, like, yeah, I mean, and being in mind, there's a lot on there now. There's quite a few games, etc. Your game is still standing out on there. I don't know if you noticed that, but you know, a few scrolls down and you're there.
Yeah, and that's sort of like this self-feeding thing. And this is one of the things why we push side quests like a lot early on when there was like there wasn't as much, because like our thinking was if we can get into that top bracket, it's the ones that people will see and it'll just keep, you know, it's just like an advantage to get us up for higher and self and feedback into itself.
Yeah. I mean, what are your plans around like storyline for it, etc.? Are you planning to like kind of maybe do things like intros and will it interlink into that, or is it what's the kind of the end result plan?
So it'll be like a series of around, I think we're looking around 20 or so missions at the moment. But the tech we're looking at is to get sort of, because we've already got some branching stuff in there. Like, you know, you have a mission where you can play it, and then right now it's sort of at the end you can go, do I want to do this mission or this mission? You know, the next part that branches out and it kind of comes back in again. We're kind of looking at what else we can do with that. Like we're a big fan of Star Fox, how there's kind of branching based off gameplay. So we may do something kind of a bit more like that. Story-wise, we're not going for some kind of really highbrow kind of deep story in this thing. Like we kind of liken it to like a Saturday morning cartoon or something like that. Like that's sort of the vibe that we're going to go to. So there'll be, you know, big bads that you're fighting in different environments. There won't be some like very deep underlying narrative with all these kind of themes of whatever, you know. But we want it to be something fun, you know, and what we try to do is lean into our Australianness a bit, which is why it's sort of so heavily themed around Australia. And you know, we've gone for like native Australian animals and kind of things like that. Yeah, you know, there'll be a story of like a big bad that you need to fight off to kind of get out of your, you know, your homeland. Like, yeah, but there'll definitely be like progression through different environments and things like that.
I really like the Australian theme and the voices and stuff as well. So wanted to ask you, how was that doing the voiceover parts? That's quite for me, that's an integral part of the game. That's really cool.
So the voices originally, like, because I do most of them.
Do you? Oh, cool.
Yeah, and we originally, they were totally placeholder. We kind of went, look, I'm not a voice actor. Michael's not a voice actor. We can't afford voice acting. We didn't really want to get in like AI voice. I don't really like that much. And so we just started voicing it ourselves and totally expecting everyone to hate it, but they haven't. And like, it's very, very surprising. We've had a couple of people going, I hate the voice acting, but the majority actually don't mind it.
Yeah, it works really well.
Yeah,
I didn't realize it was yourselves actually. I thought you had some sort of pro in to do that.
Yep, most of them are me.
I can recognise your voice.
Sorry,
I can recognise your voice now. We're talking.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. My favorite is Perry. I like doing him the most. It's oh no, how you going, Keithy?
Perfect.
Oh, chips. I was like. Yeah, so I've kind of been enjoying it more than I thought I would. But yeah, so kind of like our kind of process for the writing now is Michael will kind of build out the level because he's doing most of that, and then he'll go through and kind of like just write like kind of not just kind of placeholder dialogue of the beats that he wants for the narrative, and then I do a pass on it where I go through I kind of rewrite a lot of it, just like basically rephrasing the beats to kind of like suit the characters. Get Michael to kind of go, have a read over it and goes, yeah, that's good. And then I'll go away and I'll record it, and then it goes in.
And how long does it take you to do those voice recordings? Because when we're trying to do videos, it's one of the worst parts for us, is trying to do that narration and get it to sound right.
Yeah. It normally takes about a day. That's about what I got to set aside for it. Because it's just sort of like doing the script and then going through, and like once I've actually got all the script written, it's not so bad. But normally it's like each line I'll do, 10, 15 takes. And after, my voice will get a bit sore after a while as well, especially with Keith, because it's sort of like right from the back of the throat. So it gets a bit sore. So I've got to kind of like, what I'll do is I'll listen back to the recordings and I'll try to listen for the bits where it sounds like my voice is breaking through, and just try to skip those ones. So, because like, especially as my voice gets more tired, like I'll just sort of revert back to how I normally speak.
Got you.
So I've obviously recently bought one of these haptic vests. Have you thought about maybe? I was playing it yesterday, thinking as those things were shooting and coming over at you and hitting you, probably the rumbles in that probably would have worked quite well. Any plans for like maybe integrating that at some point?
Well, they said they were going to send us one, so we're talking to a rep a while ago, but they sort of went dark. I probably should poke them again. Go, hey, can we get one, please?
I think that. I guess my feeling on it was always it was just going to be a bunch of rumbling here or there. But weirdly, in a game, it's really effective. It really makes you actually, that immersion level kind of increases tenfold once you're in there.
Yeah. It's an interesting one getting in those kinds of things, because they're not really, like, I don't know how many extra sales we'll get. So we have to kind of like do this balancing thing of like, well, is it worth me, say, spending a week? Because especially me with a baby, a week of my time can be quite a lot. Is it worth us getting in, and if we have to buy it and things like that as well. But I had to look through like at the API for the vest, and it looked pretty straightforward. Because if they can send us one, then the plan is to get one in, because I've got to go in and refactor all the haptics anyway. So it's like, well, if you can send us in the vest when I'm going working on the haptic stuff again.
It makes sense, and I think they should probably do that to try and grow their vest at the end of the day. I think in terms of doing it. But like you say, I guess if your sales start to increase and you can start to see that coming in, and you might see some benefit in investment into that later on.
Yeah, I mean, the other side of it is like, even if people don't really buy the vest that much, then the content creators could also kind of go, oh, well, no, it supports it, so I'll use it to make a video about you. So like there is sort of like, we try to look at it as like, we're quite pragmatic. Like, one of the things that we have to do with such limited resources is be very picky about like where we're spending our time. So we'll kind of look at things like, what are we going to get out of this, like, rather than kind of always chasing, because it'd undoubtedly be fun to work with 100%, but we've got to be a little bit disciplined about where we're spending our time.
No, I totally understand that.
So James, I think people may be interested in how you got started in kind of game development. I mean, it's kind of a dream job for a lot of people, right? But maybe they don't know how you
they don't know the realities of it.
I'd be interested to hear your story.
So I used to make games when I was very young. Like, I was making games with back in GW Basic, using early game creation tools like Click and Play. I think I started coding when I was around 6 or somewhere around there. And when I was a kid, I kind of made lots of games. And then when I went to uni, I stopped. And it was because I discovered that what I liked about programming wasn't really so much the games. It was like, I liked programming. It's like a passion. I liked doing it. So for about 9 years, I wasn't in games. Like, once I graduated uni, I did my software engineering degree, kind of working for 9 years to kind of do web development, app development. And I kind of ended up in this kind of weird situation where I've been working for these big companies, and I'd never shipped anything, or nothing had gone into production. And it was like this really depressing point where I'd realized I'd spent all this time working on things which just weren't ever used. And so I ended up meeting a bunch of games people, and I noticed culturally there's like this like thing of like shipping is king. And so I was kind of drawn to that. It wasn't really so much the game development stuff. It was like just this culture around getting stuff out. And that's sort of what led me down the path. So I started working at Defiant. They're like a Brisbane studio. I started working for those guys, and that sort of just took me down that path. So it wasn't really like the passion for game stuff. It was like this passion to get shit done that got me out, got me into it. My advice for kind of getting into game stuff is, especially from a programmer perspective, which is where I come from, is it's good if you've got like a backup career, where you've got like this safety net to take risks. And that's where I feel like I've been pretty lucky, because like there's always development jobs. And so I can go, well, how about I'll do this more risky contract, or do this more risky project, and if it doesn't work out, you can go back. It's a lot harder if you're in like an artist or in game design. So I'm a bit lucky on that front.
Is that what you do then? Is it like would you actually take time out of work for a little bit and work on a project, and then after a period of time maybe go back into full-time employment elsewhere, or what do you do?
I haven't done that for a while now. Like when I first started getting back into game stuff, it was really on the side. So I was going home and kind of doing lots of development, as well as my day job. And then eventually I got into like an actual game studio, and that sort of started. But then I was also working at home on my own projects again. So I was kind of Sorry,
I think the important thing is just plugging away, isn't it? Like even if you just put an hour in a day or whatever it is you might do, just a little bit of kind of just do a bit each day, and eventually over time it starts to grow. You just got to keep watering it, I suppose.
Yeah, you kind of want to keep chipping away at it. I mean, if you're smart about your time, you can make a lot of progress with less hours in there. That's probably one of the things that I guess working for so long in kind of like as a programmer before I got into games, like I got quite good at knowing how long things will take me. So that makes it much easier to go, well, I've got, I don't know, 4 hours or something like that. Like, well, what can I do that's going to be useful to contribute to the project in that time? And quite often that isn't the most fun thing. It's like, all right, what's kind of most important? And and that way you're kind of making meaningful steps all the time.
Do you think, realistically, if we've got people watching this that want to get into development, they could start something up from their bedroom effectively, and just keep chipping away, as you say, maybe a bit of a side hustle perhaps alongside other things? And is the message, just keep going and it may open doors for you? Or
yeah, definitely. The VR at the moment is a very tinker friendly place, and the tools that are available now for people who don't have, haven't gone to university to study software engineering or something like that, it's so much more accessible. Like, you can grab Unreal Engine and start messing around with some blueprints, and like you can make some stuff. Like if you want to do something with a lot of complexity, then it's kind of, there's a lot you need to learn to get there. But I think if your idea is simple enough, and honestly, the best thing you can do is just get started, accept that your first 10 projects are going to fail, and then eventually you'll get there. Like it's like there's this thing like when you start making games where you don't understand exactly how much work you're making for yourself. It's that like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where like you've got this confidence of like how much stuff you can do, but you don't have the skills to know that it's just not feasible. So like the classic thing is like the first game someone will make will be an RPG. Like, I'm going to make this RPG, not knowing that like that's one of the most difficult things to make, because there's so many systems in there that need to work together. Like there's so much content that needs to be made. And then you start to do it, and then you realize, oh, I can't. So I guess my advice would be expect to fail. That's okay. And then once you've failed a few times, go and make Tetris, go and make Pong, and then build from there.
I mean, do you use VR? I mean, I think you were saying you obviously suffer a little bit with the sea legs. So do you use it much yourself outside of development?
A little bit less since babies come along. Like it's just been harder to kind of like find the time to kind of do it. But yeah, like I do. Like just recently I was playing Fisherman's Tale, And yeah, I love that. But I've got like a couple of games sitting on there. I haven't even loaded up. Like I've got The Room that I got on sale a little while ago. It's like I haven't even had the time to get in there and load it up yet. But I do need to actually get into it more, because like it's how I learn personally what works and what doesn't. And I can save myself a lot of time if I've played all these games and I see how people do things. I don't have to go and reinvent wheels. I can go, I remember playing that game and that's how they did object interaction, and that worked really well. And just sort of use that as inspiration.
It's funny, isn't it, with VR? Because like it's one of those things that it is a really good platform to play on. It's really good fun. But when you think about having to play on it, if you're a little bit tired, it does feel a little bit more like you have to be a bit more energetic than you would be if you were sat down playing on a PlayStation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the Quest is definitely a lot better because it's so much easier to just put on. Like I don't have to worry about starting up the game on the PC and like dealing with the cables and things like that. Like that accessibility of just putting on the headset is it's as good as it's going to get. Like in terms of user experience.
I was watching an interview with Mark Zuckerberg, and I think his vision, I think it really is to slim. He really wants to slim them down, doesn't he, to become more sleek type goggles that you're just going to put on. So I guess over the next 5-10 years, I think we'll probably see that really start to sleek down a little bit.
Yeah, well, I'm really interested in things like the Apple glasses when they come along. Like it just from like my personal consumer perspective, I prefer the idea of AR over VR. Just because like I like to be able to see the world around me. And so I'm really looking forward to that point. And we're seeing that with the Quest now, like the pass-through mode that you can just tap, and like they're doing things like the keyboard visualization they did recently, so you can bring a keyboard into VR and it actually appears like, or the tech they've got where they're mapping out environments just that you can kind of like feel like you're in a different place. Like I like that these barriers are being pulled down, so it's not always about just completely blocking out the world. So like, I'm hoping that's where it gets to, where you've got the option to block out the world, but there can also be stuff where it's like I can still see, I can have a conversation with my wife, while I can see her, while I'm doing stuff.
I had I mean, we have some of the advantages due to our day jobs and stuff, but I think I used a HoloLens probably a year and a half ago from Microsoft, which is a little bit of that. Although it was very, very good, it didn't quite feel like they were ready or there yet. Again, that was quite a while ago, so I've not actually seen what AR can do yet in terms of goggle form.
Because I used the HoloLens for the first time a few years ago, and that was like I think the first gen. I haven't used. I think there's a sequel like the second gen is there. I haven't used that. But what really struck me with that tech, even though when I had the headset on, I was like looking through a tiny window, the anchoring was basically perfect. Like when I was using it, like you put something on a wall and it would just be there. And so the moment there's that field of view that can open up, like I see the applications for things like that, like a virtual display, or like a TV. Like if you want to have a 100-inch television, like projected on your wall, like these things become more viable. Like I'm really excited about the tech, but it seems like VR is sort of the focus of the industry at the moment, and that's why like Apple glasses. I'm keen to see what they do when they eventually come out. I know it'll be quite limited, but just like what the direction of that's going to be.
Do you see yourselves diversifying in the future then into maybe not just pure gaming, but as things progress and develop, those different kinds of experiences and maybe some AR type stuff as well?
Maybe. I think that I think our creative passion is making games. So we'll see. Like I've worked for companies before where I've done kind of real serious game stuff, where I've worked using game development skills, but for like training biosecurity staff to kind of spot things. Or there was one I worked on. It was a training game for people dealing with the elderly or people with mental illness, like knowing how far to stand away and kind of things like that. Like I do like the idea of like socially beneficial games. So like if those opportunities came up, I think we kind of look at them and discuss them. But I think Trickshot will be a game studio. I guess that'll because a lot of what we're doing at the moment is building out tech that we can then kind of take on to do other things.
I see what you're saying, because you're almost like going to build a baseline, right? And then you can in theory just translate that into other types of games potentially.
Yeah, basically. Like, this particular game, it's, built around, a sort of a plane flying. But there's other avenues we can take that tech. Like there was a show demo we did back with the original mobile version, which was more about like a pirate ship. That was sort of like a mobile, but it was all using kind of the same underlying tech. So yeah, we've already discussed, what are different ways that we can take it. But yeah, I think that'll be kind of our focus. I mean, fingers crossed that Sky makes money. That's sort of got to be the first step. Make money from video game. But then yeah, we've got some kind of bigger plans of where we'd like to take it.
Have you, in your head at the moment, have you got Sky Squadron 2 in your head, or is that way off? Is it really literally just get Sky Squadron 1 done and
we'll get Sky Squadron 1 done. I think, and this is probably from us coming from our mobile backgrounds. We probably more think about what are we doing to iterate on Sky Squadron, rather than, we make a game and, say it's got, 20, 30 levels or something like that, and then we sell the sequel. We kind of tend to think more, well, what can we do for like holiday events? What can we do to kind of like give people what are the value adds that we can do? How do we do a random mode? Like, how do we flesh out multiplayer options? Like, I think we like the idea of kind of focusing in on the product and just keep adding value to it. And I think especially in VR, where it is a high growth industry, rather than going back to the beginning and making a game, if we have a game that's sitting, pretty high in the charts as popular, and there's constantly new users coming in, well, that's people coming and buying it still. So there's not really a need to go back. We haven't tapped out the market. We can keep just making it better for everyone, and that's great for the people who've already got it. Like they're getting this constantly evolving product.
Yeah, it sounds similar to kind of Fortnite or that kind of model where these big events, don't you? Like my son gets, you won't believe how excited they get about, the next release, whatever they call it. I'm not familiar with Fortnite so much, but the excitement that gets generated around it. And as you say, it's the same game, just with new features, functionality, and that seems to work really well in that model. So
yeah, I think we'd be more likely for the next game not to do Sky Squadron 2. It'd be like a different product, probably using like similar underlying tech, but we do something a bit different. Maybe same universe, I don't know, but different game.
As a consumer, what can we do to support these, people like yourself or VR devs?
I just play it and let us know what you think. Like, it's I can't undersell like how much value we get out of feedback. Like, we have people come in the Discord and just say, I really liked it, but this part was boring, I didn't like this. Like, we love it. Like, anyone that can tell us how our game sucks means that we know where to focus. Because like we spend our day staring at it, and you just lose objectivity. Like I will be focusing on what I think is important, but it could be something completely irrelevant. So when someone comes in and goes, oh, I played it, but I couldn't start the game, or the menus were confusing, it's like, well, maybe I should be focusing on that. Like, that's the important part. Or it might be like we watch someone play it and they get the controls intuitively. It's like, okay, that's good. Maybe I don't need to spend months tutorializing. Maybe we can kind of get away with like something because it's already kind of intuitive enough that people pick it up. So honestly, it's feedback. That's the number one thing that can, yeah, and telling your friends to download it, like, because then we get more people, so, and more feedback.
I did actually recently just started following you on Discord, actually, so I'll put some stuff in there.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we'll also share it as part of this video, actually, because I do see, I think you're on a fair few. You're on Instagram, you're on Discord, you're on Twitter.
Yeah, Facebook, all the kind of the. I think we're too old to be on TikTok. We're not cool enough.
Yeah, I don't really know how to use TikTok myself, to be honest. I kind of go on there.
It's how, actually, the moment I realized that I am now an old guy was I was walking through a supermarket just past a newsagent or something, and they had these magazines up there, and it was like popular vloggers and like streamers, and I just realized, oh, I can't relate to this. I've done it. I've crossed the threshold into old uncool guy. And I wasn't cool to start off with. Now I've got the old added to it.
Yeah, it's scary, isn't it? It is scary how quickly the world is changing compared to like. I mean, I'm 42 years old, so we kind of in the 90s in gaming, and I look back and it's like a totally different era, isn't it? Like it's not even recognisable to the way things are run now. And I was using TikTok, but admittedly it's quite addictive. You end up sitting there for an hour just going through that.
I mean, I have installed TikTok, and I've looked at it, and I have found some pretty funny stuff on it. But like, I feel like if I engage with it, I'm going to engage with it in the completely wrong way, and just like expose how much I do not understand anything about about this platform. So I'll just sit there and observe.
I mean, we put a Crocodile Dundee clip into our review of your game just for a bit of fun. But we're thinking, who's going to understand this now? There's certain people of a certain age will understand this joke. But, younger people are like, well, who's Crocodile Dundee? What's that guy?
Yeah, well, there was a joke that I saw today outside a chemist, which was advertising earwax removal. And it was a picture of a guy with like a kind of like a karate kind of thing around his head saying wax out. And I looked at him and I get your funny joke. And then I thought, who else knows a Karate Kid?
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? Well, you say that, I think Karate Kid's had a bit of a comeback, hasn't it? Because it's now got a TV series.
Oh, there's a Cobra Kai thing from the... Yeah, I've been meaning to watch that.
Yeah, I watched season 1. It was really good, actually.
Okay, I should give it a go.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably it in terms of questions that we've got for you then, James. I mean, obviously, thank you very, very, very much for coming along and telling us a bit about what you're doing with the games, etc. I'm quite excited, actually, about what you're going to do for the future. So I'll be absolutely keeping...
No, I appreciate you taking the time to have a chat.
When do you think it'll be on the store? So you think by end of year, yeah? In terms of officially?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to depend a lot on actually getting, the thumbs up from Oculus as well. I was just to say, it's not just on Oculus. Like we've got this thing cross-platform, so we've got a version up on Steam as well, and it's got cross-platform multiplayer and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of we aim for Quest, but because Quest is running mobile hardware, we just sort of get it for free. We get it also running really well on PC as well. So yeah, so there's a few different avenues to get it.
Well, that's an interesting point, actually. Then, so in terms of if you can get it via PC, will it be exactly the same game? In terms of because some PC VR games might have improved graphics or whatever it might be. Would they still be identical?
They're pretty close. Like we do have some differences in kind of quality settings depending on the platform. But because we've gone for that kind of really simplistic low poly flat shaded kind of style, we've got it running well on both. We built the art around getting it to run well and everything. So we don't really feel like we need to turn up the bells and whistles for PC, because we've already kind of got it running looking how we want it to look like on Quest.
So James, is there one, if there's a message that you want to get out to people about Sky Squadron, Trickshot, VR in general, is there one thing that you wanted to put out there before we wrap up?
Come give the game a go. You can just grab it for free. And if you can get involved in helping us make the game awesome, that's fantastic.
Oh, listen, Tony, really good to meet you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's great chatting to you guys.
All the best, and James, take care, mate.
Thanks very much.
Cheers, man.